The U.S. national parks are often celebrated as a modern template for conservation and public recreation, but the idea that everyone should have access to collectively owned lands is not new. In Polynesia, systems of land tenure have long allowed for communally controlled agriculture to flourish. Justinian law in Roman antiquity protected access to sustenance from rivers, fields, or forests as an unassailable right. In southern Europe, the Middle East, and Mongolian steppe, pastoral nomads have long enjoyed right-of-way in their seasonal practices of transhumance. Today in the US, these ancient ethics are codified in the policies and practices of other government bodies, including the US Forest Service and Bureau of Land Management. These agencies regulate both communal and private use of much of the nation's natural resources, such as grazing leases, mineral and timber rights, water and hydroelectric. All of these are examples of community-based resource management and access. But these systems often center on resource utility rather than intrinsic value. The U.S. national parks became the first example of protected commons at the national level, not for practical or monetary ends, but for the preservation of life and cultural heritage found on those lands, and for the stewardship of these spaces for all visitors and for all time. Incorporated through the Organics Act of 1916, the mission of the National Park Service is to conserve the scenery and the natural and historic objects and the wildlife therein, and to provide for the enjoyment of the same in such a manner and by such means as will leave them unimpaired for the enjoyment of future generations. In the intervening century, the National Park System has grown to encompass 433 sites in all 50 states, the District of Columbia, and U.S. territories. Contained within these 84 plus million acres are innumerable rare and sensitive life forms, unique ecosystems, and geographies. This includes thousands of miles of river, lakeshore, and coastline, the highest mountains in North America, the hottest and driest deserts, rainforests, historic architecture, culturally sensitive sites, and objects. But national parks are more than just rugged mountains and glacial blue streams. National parks also uphold rich cultural histories. If you visit the New Orleans Jazz National Historic Park, it's as much a musical celebration and exuberant performance as it is a place. National parks can also be physical reminders of the people and struggles that underlie the national heritage of the United States. That includes darker chapters in this history of this country, such as at Manzanar, where U.S. citizens were wrongly interred during World War II. And national parks aren't just destinations, they can be right at our doorstep. So what then are the key elements that define a national park? There are three categories: resources, assets, and values. Resources entail the natural and cultural, both physical and intangible features of that landscape. Assets include the physical structures and tangible property, much of which is used to maintain and make accessible these spaces. And there are also values, which are the intrinsic attributes, the ineffable essence of a park landscape. When we think of natural resources, this includes the incredible diversity of flora, towering redwoods, colorful wildflowers, stout barrel cactus. The ecosystems within national parks offer important refuge for a startling array of life. And that includes our fauna as well. Many species such as manatee, bison, desert tortoise are all federally endangered. In some cases, national parks can be the last place some of these species are found, or a park may have been critical to the recovery of a species on the brink of extinction, such as in the case of a tule elk or the California condor. For the millions of migratory birds, national parks are a haven as well for their long migration. And these natural resources also include the geology as well. A geology that creates those unique microclimates, soils, and aquifers that support our flora and our fauna. Geology that can be equally breathtaking, describing the deep history of the continent through upheaval, collision, erosion, glaciers, magma flow, and fire. And the story wouldn't be complete without also talking about water, freshwater, saltwater, brackish water, that mixing of the two. Oceans, lakes, rivers, aquifers, all are encompassed within our national parks, from the cold, clear, oligotrophic waters of Crater Lake to warm, fertile wetlands that we find in the Everglades. And this hydrology of our national parks, it's not just essential to wildlife. Drinking water for countless people, such as residents of Fort Collins and Miami, can be traced to the protected waters of national park lands. All these resources we've looked at, the animals, the plants, the soil, and water, experience the effects of climate change in unique and intersecting ways. Exposure, severity, and adaptation are going to therefore look different in each of these parks, as we'll cover in this series. National parks also include cultural resources. Some of the cultural resources may be objects, written documents and recordings, or even physical landmarks like monuments. These cultural resources may seem more removed from climate change in a museum, behind glass, or made from something sturdy like granite or marble, but climate change affects all aspects of conservation of these objects as well. These resources are not immune to wildfire, hurricane, or acid rain, and unlike natural resources, many of these cultural resources cannot adapt or migrate. When they are gone forever. Cultural resources also include landscapes and natural elements as well that blend these elements, battlefields, historical forts like Harper's Ferry, indigenous oak orchards, or important viewsheds. They often are this middle ground between cultural and natural elements. A species or ecosystem may also be a cultural resource. Races of salmon in the Pacific Northwest tell a story of both subsistence and ceremony for various groups of indigenous peoples. Cultural resources, therefore, often transcend the tangible. They are often places and physical touchstones imbued with some level of extra importance by humans. And that brings us to park values. These are the intrinsic aspects, why we visit national parks in the first place, the stuff that enriches and inspires. Maybe you're into backpacking, hiking, camping, or river rafting, and this is certainly one reason why people do visit the parks. But national parks offer more than just a far-off vacation destination. National parks are in every state and territory, with many smaller sites intersecting cities and towns. In some cases, and this is true for both urban and rural communities, national parks may offer one of the few green spaces or public forums, and few spaces that may be free to the public. Many Americans, such as in DC and San Francisco, regularly picnic or go for a run in National Park without even realizing it. And educational programs, town halls, live music, and festivals provide us with opportunities for community in these spaces as well. To learn more about ourselves, others, and the world around us, these are some of the important aspects that make national parks important. But all this needs to be supported by real, tangible infrastructure, known as our assets, that are maintained by NPS as well as local or regional municipalities. In some cases, a visitor center built in the 1930s, or even a well-constructed washroom high in the Cascades, may also be considered a cultural resource. Often referred to as parkitecture, these historical buildings frequently lean on regional and cultural building practices and the arts. Some of this infrastructure is well adapted already to the environment. For example, adobe in the petrified forest help insulate against hot summer days, and high-peaked roofs that we find in Mount Rainier help to shed snowfall. But other infrastructure like coastal roads, power lines, and docks may be at risk of sea level rise, heat stress, or in and of themselves present a heightened risk of hazards like wildfires. And other infrastructure may simply not meet our long-term goals for climate neutrality. As climate change impacts political and infrastructural realities, parks must adapt to these changing dynamics. As parks look to the future, they must incorporate how visitors use and rely on parks and how that may shift. Ultimately, as these assets support all visitors, planning for climate change means ensuring parks are ever more accessible to everyone, and that we are conserving the resources and values that are important to all people. National parks and federal protection helps enshrine a myriad of cultural, natural, and recreational features. But preservation of these sites is not limited to legal designation or their demarcation of protected status on a map. Care and attention is required in perpetuity by land managers, biologists, park rangers, archivists, and the public. How climate change will impact these disparate natural and cultural resources remains unclear. Already witnessed through desert drought, glacial retreat, coastal flooding, eroding petroglyphs, and fire-damaged infrastructure, the repercussions of climate change demand diverse management solutions now. It's been remarked that national parks are America's best gift to herself. Why is that? These places are at most constant reminders of some of our deepest, most humanistic values, the sanctity and celebration of all species, all life, all people, and all stories. With dedication and with work, we've entrusted ourselves as a society with a perennial duty to protect these things.